Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to start by thanking Mohammed and ArchiNet for hosting us for this talk. Today, I'm going to share with you a research that I've been working on with my colleague, architect Rزان سمباوه, and it's talking about the influence of COVID-19 and the quarantine on our lifestyle and home design. So how did the idea all start? As an academic and as a professional, and as two working moms, we were discussing over the phone one day the influence of what the lockdown has done to our life and the issues that we have been facing. And instead of complaining, we decided, you know what, why don't we do research about this? As two people working in academia, let's just, instead of complaining, do more research, find out how we can resolve this in the future. And from this, we noticed that, and I think this is a note that everyone have noticed during the past few months. Life as we know it has changed completely. We were in a society where people went out most of the time, went out for commercial reasons like doing their shopping, socializing, going to malls, which was part of our culture here in Saudi Arabia. People went to work normally in the morning, schools were running normally and kids would go to school. We are people who pride in our social and cultural bonds, and we usually host people, a lot of people in our houses. We used to visit people in their houses. We have very strong family ties where we actually spend lots of time with our families, especially in the month like Ramadan, where even some people would move to their family house just to all gather in this holy month and have those social bonds. However, all of a sudden, all of these things has completely changed. We noticed that there is a lots of barriers to participate in our work and daily activities. There was a huge disruption to our home life and daily routine. There was a loss of sense of safety. We were really scared, and there was lots of uncertainties going on. There was lots of fears of being infected, fears of even losing our jobs, and economic pressures put on lots of people with lots of commercial things stopping, and lots of economic problems hitting lots of parts of the city. And there was, of course, the loss of connection with friends and family. We were used to go and visit people and go out and hang around with lots of our family and our friends, and all of a sudden we are very careful not to be with friends. We cannot see our friends, and we felt this feel of seclusion away from our loved ones. And of course, the most taken for granted aspect was the loss of actually leaving the house, whenever you want. And life was really completely different for us, even as Muslims, seeing mosques and a very brave move by the government, seeing Mecca and Medina, the Haramain, completely empty of people, our streets completely empty, like a ghost city. Our Corniche in Jeddah, for example, which we take pride in, and it's a part of our, like life, going there on weekends and having walks, lots of activities. All of a sudden, we cannot go to the Corniche, a place where even people from different parts of Saudi Arabia would come and enjoy Jeddah in the summer, for example, for the beach. And so all of this completely was a shocking realization to all of us. And then there was the old norm that we all used to and took for granted. And all of a sudden, there was this emerging new norm that we noticed is happening. And it's completely disturbing because this was a complete change to all our habits and all our routine. So, of course, educational system has been suffering a lot. People went all the way online. Everything, this interaction with people, with your teachers in person was not happening anymore. Economy was really hit hard. And I think that lots of people lost their jobs, got deduction in their salaries. Lots of businesses closed for a long time, which really affected the economy in a very bad way. And travel was really disturbed. We take pride in traveling in Saudi Arabia. People even travel a lot internally just to visit family members and to have work and business trips, and even traveling abroad with lots of even expats living. All of a sudden, you are cut completely from the outside world. Work was completely disturbed. Even small activities, our daily activities was disturbed as well. We cannot play sports the way we used to. We cannot work, go to our businesses. So it was really a completely new norm. And with this evolved lots of, the stages of grief. There was lots of stages that we went through. There was this feeling of, in the beginning, denial, like, okay, we hear of COVID-19, we know it's happening, but we don't really see the impact. And all of a sudden, when it came close to us and the lockdown started, we felt fearfulness, like, what's happening? Will it continue? And then angry, why is the lockdown happening? Maybe it's a couple of days, no, it's taking longer than expected. And then we started feeling, why is this happening for longer? And then we realized that, you know, this is actually taking longer than anticipated. And we started to become really worried, like worried for the future, worried for lots of things, the uncertainty, and depression creeped on us. Lots of people felt depression, like lots of studies showed that people either felt depression just because of the lockdown and the feeling of seclusion that the lockdown has brought, or because the uncertainties of economic uncertainties, for example, for people losing their jobs or losing their income. However, because we are, as humans, we are also very adaptable and we are stronger than we know. So with change, people has realized, you know, COVID-19 is going nowhere and it's staying for long. So we have to adapt. We have to accept the fact that life has to evolve back in a different way than we know to accommodate this situation. So we realized that we are braver than we know. We are actually capable. And this, as designers, where our role came, we thought, you know, we are designers. Maybe design also has this aspect where we can be more brave and more capable in our designs to fulfill these new norms. But let me take you one step ahead of a routine of a daily routine of our, we used to spend maybe 8 to 10 hours out of the house. People would only stay in their house just to rest, just to sleep, perhaps sometimes to host people to their house. However, most of the activities like shopping, work, school, working out, events and outings, we conducted outside of the house. So the house was not overloaded with activities. But all of a sudden, after the lockdown, for 24 hours a day, maybe 23, if we're lucky enough to go 1 hour outside and do an activity or do a chore, we realized that all our activities is confined to this one space, confined to being able to sleep, work out, and social, everything without the confinement of this small space. And with this creeps a lot of uncertainties, a lot of people being uncomfortable in their own spaces, and people feeling the pressure of or the unfulfillment of how the space around them was not fulfilling enough for their needs. And because of this disruption, I think because we use the same space for work, for eating, for working out sometimes, and for studying, we felt that, you know, from the moment we wake up to the moment we sleep, it's like we're working, just because we're staying in the same space and we are confined to the space. However, like anything else, comes also positive notes with a change. So change brings also opportunities for lots of things to happen. So for example, there was no rush hour. People, you could wake up 5 minutes before your meeting and be there, even wearing your pajama, and you can still be in the meeting as well. Of course, there was less pollution. Lots of the impact on the environment was really pleasing, because lots of reports showed that pollution are being less because of the no traffic and less pollution and less energy consumption and so on. And another thing was that the online platform. People used to hear about, you know, smart technologies and online platforms a lot, but we didn't actually utilize it. But in this quarantine time or this lockdown time, we were actually able to learn a lot. People learned a lot of tools. Elderly people, young people, everyone had to deal with the technology and learn a lot of things online. Of course, this gave us more time on hand. So people invested a lot of this time and reading perhaps books, doing hobbies that they have no enough time to do before because of the rush hour, because of commuting. And of course, we had more family time together. And there was even jokes of, okay, now getting to know your family more because you have actually to spend time with them in the same house. And most importantly is the hygiene. As Muslims, we have hygiene, نظافة من الإيمان, in our religion. However, now with the fear of infection, we were really scared, and we started taking notice to how our daily routine, the hygiene, making sure that we wash a lot, making sure that everything just for keeping away the infection and keeping away and sanitizing everything around us. So this helped a lot on lots of positive notes. And so, yes. So now I'll move to my friend who will continue.
So I hope my voice is clear. So this pandemic is not a surprise. I mean, it might be a surprise because we didn't see it coming. But if we took a step back and we started to look at how history has been laid out, this is not a surprise. It happened before, it's happening now, and it could happen again. And if we look at the history, it helps us understand that if we are more ready next time and we are ready for future pandemics, then possibly we could be more adaptable and we could be more accepted. So if we look a little bit back, during the 14th century, the plague or the Black Death or a Ta'un emerged. It basically came from the rats on the cargo shipments and then was spread to the city by sailors. And trade became an issue by then. So the economy went down. It was a shock to the Europeans and the Asians at that time. And a popular motif emerged by art and architecture is the dance of the death. And people thought that, okay, it's the end of the world, let's celebrate life. And from there, the Renaissance cities came in. In the 19th century, the cholera also started to emerge. It was spread by soldiers. And the main reason for the cholera was the noxious air. So it came from waste products, it came from foul smell, it came from garbage on the streets, it came from animal excrements. And by then, the city started to see that, okay, we need a healthier situation. So we need a better drainage and sanitary practices, better ventilation. We need to build parks. We need to have wide roads that are paved very well. So the waste, there could be a good waste management. And one of the examples of that is Central Park in New York. It was constructed during the second wave of the cholera. And in London, about 12,000 buildings were torn down because they needed to allow space for parks and better roads. Also during the 19th century came the third wave of plague. It began in Hong Kong and spread from there. They had, as a response, they had different drainage systems, small details like door thresholds and advanced building foundations because the rats started to come in from there. One of the main and very interesting case studies was the tuberculosis, مرض السل. And what happened is that it reached the United States in the 1900s, and they couldn't find a cure until 1954. So that means they stayed a long time trying to find solutions in community, in architecture, to minimize the effect of that disease. What's very interesting is that modern architecture by then started, and it reached a point where there's a very interesting book called The Sun Seekers, The Cure of California. And what it talks about is that most of the population was actually infected and people used to sunbathe outside so they could minimize the effects of the disease. And by then, a lot of the health advocates started to emerge, and they started to talk about organic food. Women should put less makeup, and they should go into more organic and natural effects. And they started to call this raw, so raw food, raw architecture. And by then, there's a very interesting example. Is one of the first houses that started to look into raw architecture was the Lovell House, or the Lovell Health House, owned by Philip Lovell. He's a nutritionist, and he owned the house by 1920, and it was designed by Richard Neutra. And the house was a reflection of, or influenced by the hospitals for the tuberculosis. So the clean lines, the light flooded sanatorium, the white painted rooms, the open balconies, to ensure mental health and well-being. Now, one of our questions was, in the future, are we going to talk about how did architecture help minimize COVID-19 or not? And this is very interesting because although subconsciously we are as a society doing everything we can to minimize this in our houses. So we sanitize everything, we put them outside, we have deliveries, we cook in-house. However, we as architects, how can we do this, and how can we know what do we actually need as a society? From there, we started to think that, okay, we need a survey and we need to understand people around us. Now, it was very hard to conduct interviews. So what we mainly did was an online survey spread across the kingdom. We got over 600 participants, and this was during Ramadan. 70% women, 30% men. Mostly we got responses from Jeddah, Makkah, Riyadh, and Al-Medina. 51% of the people who responded were employees. And this helped a lot because mostly they were working from home and they could describe how working from home and studying from home was an issue. 81% have been quarantined for over than 36 days. And I bet after the survey, they were still quarantined. 68% were married and mostly had kids. So it gets harder to deal with stuff at home with them, honestly. When we talk about households and the type of houses, we had 52% of villas, 44% of apartments, and from the villas, we had 13% of the people living in compounds. And compounds and the gated communities were the less affected by the quarantine. Looking at villas and compounds, they had more facilities than people in apartment buildings. The facilities that the compound and villas had were, for example, a front yard, a backyard, an indoor pool, an outdoor pool. So they had time to use these facilities. Even in the compound, some of them were closed. They were opened later on. It was very important that they had a cafeteria or they had a supermarket, a small one, and they had access to walking distance stuff. However, people in apartment buildings suffered the most. They had small spaces. Most of them were rentals, so they couldn't do much with this limitation of the space they had. They had single entrances to the apartment building, so that maximizes the infection rates by touching the surfaces. So I even got one of the responses that I feel my apartment is like it's like jail, كنسجن. And that really touched me because if we're going to design villas or compounds or apartments, they should be according to our needs. They should have adequate sunlight. Most of the people, what they said is just, I want to torn down the wall. I want a bigger window. I want to see the light. And the responses were really, really amazing of how they felt about their houses. This is another study by the Frequency Marketing, and they looked at what did people do during quarantine. And this is something I experienced myself when I wanted to work out at home and I went to buy some equipment and I couldn't find anything. And I started to ask myself that, surprisingly, I never thought that we were that keen on working out or exercising as people in Saudi. But honestly, no, it was a surprise that because people used to go out and go to work and go to school, they never thought that they need to work out because they were already moving all day. But sitting in one place was actually a problem. So 92% of the people started to work out. A lot of people started to read, arts, crafts. They started self-development. And as Dr. Sherin said, the online platform became a new thing. So our lifestyle changed. Whatever we used to do outside, we have to do inside, and we have to do it efficiently. And this was a challenge. One of the other things is the challenges that people faced was having to be in one space doing multiple stuff. So for example, moms and dads were working at home, children have to be online for school, all in the same space on different electronics with a good Wi-Fi, and this became also an issue for many families. So how will COVID-19, what will COVID-19 do for architecture? What are we learning from this? Now, when we looked into the history and looked into the survey, what we know for sure is that during pandemics, physical space is profoundly affected in order to minimize the risk for infections. So what are we going to change inside to minimize the infection that comes from outside? As we said, we're dealing with an enemy that we can't see. And if we think that this is the end of it, it's not. According to The Guardian, form follows the fear of infection. And this is kind of true. We are always keen on making sure that we are healthy and our families are healthy. However, if we don't have a drastic change in looking into our new needs, our new norm, we will actually put ourselves into risk in the future. Even if, inshallah, COVID-19 in this phase goes on safely, we are not affected personally. I'm sure that the society has been affected. A lot of people have been going through this, and our homes need to be adaptable for future disasters. And Dr. Sherin will continue with you.
Okay, so to be able as designers to look at this dilemma or this issue, we utilized a very well-known principle, the triple bottom line a principle for sustainability, combining social, economic, environmental. We thought that this also applied for starting a realization or adaptation to our homes. We thought of social or cultural aspects, which is really important in our home design, economical aspects, because this again will always be a criteria for any user to update their house. And most importantly, in this case, was the environmental and health issues. That because, again, like Razan says, fear of infection or architecture to disturb or to prevent the fear of infection. So again, we had to really look into what kind of environmental and health and safety things or dimensions that we can take into the design in order to prevent this. So with this, we looked into 7 different dimensions. And these dimensions, as simple as they are, however, they have a huge impact on how our house should be designed. One of the first dimension is the private outdoor space. Like we mentioned earlier, because of apartment buildings, for example, not having an outdoor space, perhaps people living in a compound or people living in a villa had the opportunity of going to a garden or a backyard or an outdoor space. However, in living in apartments, people face the issue of not having this private outdoor space. And usually before COVID-19, people living in apartment buildings, having a terrace, for example, or having a balcony was not a thing because of the privacy and the social issues. You don't want to spend time in a balcony, or you don't want to spend time having your privacy disturbed, spending time outside or in a terrace. However, now with the COVID-19, people were actually seeking this outdoor. I think now the norm has changed where people will actually look into a balcony. It would have been a relief for people living in apartments. And it doesn't have to be a balcony or an even outdoor space. It could be just a place where it's well lit, with big windows, like Razan says, with lots of sunlight coming inside, with good ventilation coming inside. Perhaps it could also be a common room, and not one common room for a whole apartment buildings, but maybe different common rooms, small common rooms, for example, for each floor or for each several floors where you have a common room, an open exposed common room, or an open exposed space that people can actually interact and utilize without having lots of crowd using the same space. Another thing that we touched upon was the adaptable layout. We usually thought that, you know, a living room is a living room and a bedroom is a bedroom, but that is not the case anymore. because people had to work from home, and because kids had to study from home, and because we had to work out from home, all of a sudden you look at your space and you know what, I have to move. If I want to work out, I have to move around furniture to find the space spacious enough for me to work out, and this is not sufficient. Sometimes the furniture is not easy to move, the furniture is not adaptable, and it becomes really an issue not even finding a place where you can do those sort of activities. So this becomes another dimension that's really important to tackle. And because working from home functionality is something that we never used to have before, maybe in some Western societies it used to be a thing, maybe in some sectors or job markets it is a thing, but now actually lots of business is reconsidering working from home. And I think it's something that will appear and will happen and becomes the norm in lots of businesses. People now are considering rotation for businesses, people not having to turn out for the office every day, maybe staying a couple of days at home and working the other couple of days from the workplace. So having this multifunctional space in our houses to accommodate home, working from home with the privacy included, with the sound insulation included. You don't want to be in a meeting, for example, and someone around you who's doing making noise, or so all of these issues has to be dealt with. The fourth dimension, and the most important, I think, is the health and hygiene thing. Because again, we used to utilize, for example, finishing materials that have health and hygiene things for clinics or hospitals. But now in our homes, we realize we need these healthy means. So we need, for example, to have more sustainable materials or sealant materials that are well sealed, materials that are repellent to dust and germs, that are easily cleaned. You don't want to have a material that's, and again, the hygiene thing does not only cover parts like materials, it also covers parts like good ventilation inside the house, where you can make sure that the house is ventilated, well ventilated every day. It covers even things like, again, sunlight entering the house and so on. Another dimension was the separate entryways. And because the transition from outside of your home to the safety of your own house, you don't even, sometimes we heard of lots of cases of people getting COVID-19 and staying locked down, just, you know, and people around them being infected just by going out, doing a small activity and coming in. So this transition from outside the house to inside the house can bring lots of germs and lots of things. So having this separate entryway helps a lot in, you know, making this transition between the outside and external and internal part of the house. And it could be either, for example, an entryway for a kitchen where you can just take away your delivery or leave your grocery bags, or it could be applied for an apartment buildings. You don't want the whole apartment building with, for example, 100 occupants coming from the same entry, using the same elevator, maybe separating them into different entryways, again, to decrease the crowds using the space. A very important dimension also is the smart systems. Before, it was a luxury having a smart system, a voice commanded system. But now with the COVID-19, we realized that not having to open a door, but having an automated open door, and perhaps having a voice command, for example, in an elevator where you can say, take me to floor number 3, instead of actually pressing the button. All of these things are really important as well. And again, most of these things were really important. And I think this all wraps in the seventh dimension, which is a multifunctional space. We really need our homes to be multifunctional, to accommodate lots of activities. Our bedroom should accommodate not only sleeping, maybe we could study from our bedroom, work out from our bedroom, have a meeting in our bedroom. So now our spaces should be more of a multifunctional space and not a specific space or a specific use for each space. So again, here comes the idea of, because home offices are in, so we are used in the contemporary architecture now and interior design that we have open plans and the spacious plan. But all of a sudden we realize we don't want the open plan. It doesn't give you the privacy needed. It's sometimes you need a more bunked or more private spaces into your plan to be able to accommodate the different activities happening in your house. So to wrap up this, we thought of giving a small zoning to a typical apartment, of how things should be in a typical apartment, just to make sure that, of course, it's an appropriate design for a post-COVID-19 situation. So again, one of the most important things is having ventilation. So all the blue lines, dashed lines are making sure that you have good ventilation, good windows, good sunlight coming to your spaces, and specifically in places like space 6, which is a living room, for example, or 7, which is a bedroom, having cross-even ventilation to make sure the places that we spend lots of time in is well ventilated as well. Another important thing is having this transition, as I mentioned before, between moving from outside of the house to the inside of the house. So you will see that, or you will notice the space number 1, which is a hallway, just so that the people don't open the plan, you know, you don't open your door and you go all of a sudden to your living room. You want this transitional space to take you to different spaces and to keep the privacy and the safety of other spaces. Number 2 is a mudroom, which is a very well-known design or aspect in Western society, because they have obviously lots of rain. So they have the mudroom where they leave the boots and leave the coats, for the raincoats. However, this mudroom was never mentioned in our society, but now it becomes maybe something that's really important to look at, because it doesn't have to be a mudroom, but it's a place where you can actually leave your abaya, leave your shoes. That's again providing this safe transition from outside to inside. Perhaps have a basin there or have a toilet close by so that you can wash your hands before even moving inside of the house. Perhaps leaving your grocery bags and your things to sanitize them before moving them inside the house, and so on. The kitchen also, which is the space number 4, is really important to be close to this so that you can take inside your grocery bags and without moving inside the house as well. Perhaps even having a separate entrance to enter the kitchen so that you can actually drop those bags and sanitize them before moving into any other space. And of course, having a bathroom where you can even have a complete shower if you want to sanitize yourself. A very important thing is that, like I said in the previous slide, is the living space. It's not a living space, it's a multi-use functional area, and it doesn't have to be an open thing. Maybe it can be divided into separate parts, giving the privacy for people perhaps to have a parent who's working out and a parent who's conducting a meeting and a child who's doing online schooling, all in one space, and accommodating all of this. And a bedroom that might be even a little bit bigger than usual, not only for sleeping, but only to accommodate a more private meal to have these functions inside.
So to wrap up, I'm sorry if we took longer, but this is a very interesting topic to us. During quarantine, we have earned a lot and we have let go of a lot. And one of the things that we should do for the sake of ourselves, our kids, to our clients, is to sit back a little bit and enjoy the space we are living in, because today our needs are different. And even if everything went back to normal, we need to address those needs, and we need to address that in the future we need to be more adaptable. We need to have an easy going inside that, and we need to look for more for a design that is more thoughtful, that we are relaxed in, and we have to be happy in our homes. Mental health is an issue right now, and I know part of it came from just the idea that we can't go out and from the quarantine. However, if we had our needs done successfully inside our houses, that could ease the process. And our number 1 issue was health and hygiene, and I think that's still an issue. We have a lot of suggestions including having better apartment buildings that go horizontal, they don't go vertical. We're looking at also how we can have single entrances for apartment buildings. As I said, apartment buildings were an issue before. We need to have a safe community for going outdoor. So even apartment buildings can have that accessibility for their kids to see the sunlight. We need to look into sustainability a little bit more. We don't have to call it sustainability. I know that's an issue for a lot of people. However, we need to look into having better sunlight, better building orientation. I know this is very theoretical, but I know as professionals, we can come together and start to discuss how we can transform our home designs into a better one. Thank you for being with us today. It's a pleasure. Thank you, ArchiNet, for having us. Next week, inshallah, there's going to be another talk to look into this in a broader kind of sense, where Dr. Sherin and her colleagues are going to go from the small house environment to talk about the neighborhood layouts and how we can have that post-COVID-19. Thank you again for having us, and we're open to questions.
Okay, so the first question that we got is from Professor Yasser Mahbub. How can we adapt our existing environment and building stocks to the new normal, existing houses, offices, schools, colleges, shopping center? So adapting, as we said, adapting our houses should start with having a transitional space. Maybe some houses already have this transitional space. It doesn't have to be a confined space, but having this idea of something like a mudroom. It could even be a simple, barrier or like a partition where you can move inside, sanitize yourself, perhaps even having a place where you can actually maybe put a basin beside the entrance door. Things like, I think other building types like shopping, offices, and shopping center, I think it becomes again the idea of introducing smart technologies, not as luxury anymore, but smart technology, especially in places, commercial places, because in our house we are dealing with a family member or a few family members. But when you go to a level of an office, a school, or a college, then you're talking multi-users, and with multi-users comes, I think now it becomes an important thing to have this functional thing of using technology, using things that you don't have to press, something that's automatically open, using those kind of technologies. Of course, maybe changing the material. Sometimes maybe you would need to change the rugs that we have at homes, or the rugs that we usually use, to other materials that are less absorbent to dust, easier, more hygienic, easier to clean, and so on. Having countertops, using more materials that are accommodated to transition of disease, easily cleaned, and so on. There's lots of actually things again, because I think Professor Yasser mentioned lots of building types. So again, it goes completely, like there's a few normal things that goes from a building type to another, but there's also different things and aspects comes from an apartment building to a home, to a working place and a commercial place. And with the amount of users that use the place, also the category and the requirements has to be higher, and safety has to be, safety measures has to be more of a priority, and also more of a thing to be considered. Does anyone want to add something?
Just one of the things that I think restaurants and some of the workplaces are doing is that they're having these like shields between one person and another. Although this might be a temporary solution, I think the number of people that are using the building is an issue. Even in schools, I mean, if there's like a small classroom that has 30 to 40 students, that could be an issue. And so minimizing crowded spaces is one of the things that we should consider as well. And this is one of the things that also has been done in the past.
Another question we got from Ms. Abir. Okay, so she says that I think the researchers are jumping into speculation conclusions regarding post-COVID-19 and are talking about the new normal, whereas I feel that there is no new normal. The existing lifestyle will persist. So she has two parts, and another part maybe is the 7 dimension you mentioned at the end. As a result of your observation, solutions are a kind of a reaction. You are still revolving around the same approach of designing, however, slightly changing the method of design, but not the method to the built environment. Okay, so I think let's to cover first number 1, and then
I just have something briefly to say. We're not, this is not a final study. We know that we are in constant change. And one of the most interesting things about this study was actually that we are living it. So whatever I say today might change tomorrow, but not in terms of going back, but in terms of evolving. And this is why we really want to look into this, because every day we as a society should be adaptable. And this is actually the part that we're talking about, adaptability. So not necessarily reforming something exclusively new, but no, we're looking into, we need to be acceptable to change. And this is something that we weren't doing before. We were building in the same way, in the same sequence, and there was no change to that. And if we actually look back to the history, the tuberculosis era, the modern architecture then is where we are living today. So we are building on new norms, not necessarily for the sake of this is the end of the world. No, not yani, la abadan. What we're looking at is more of how can our houses be more adaptable? Are we going to look into a new way of building? Can we look into new materials? Can we actually have a healthy home, mentally and physically?
Okay, so if I would like to add a few things about the, of course, you mentioned that the 7 dimensions are actually an observation or the result of your observation are kind of a reaction. It is a combining of a reaction, but also it's a solution in itself. Because again, if you don't have this transitional space, and if you move inside the house completely, for example, having those, having no hygiene, having materials that very easily grasping, for example, germs, things like having no technology. Like if I go to the things where we were discussing the 7 dimensions, to the slide again, I think this is not only a reaction, because a lack of an outdoor space, for example, really affected the health and mental issue of people. So people are considering even moving from their houses. So if, as an owner, and even if I own a building and I'm renting it to people, I would want to know that, okay, from now on, perhaps now having a terrace in an apartment building is an important element that was not used before. So these are not only reactions, these are things that maybe now we have to utilize and include in our design. Otherwise, people will not be fulfilled with the design. Having an adaptable layout comes more under the umbrella of interior design, because you know how you move the furniture around, but people now might actually consider, yes, using less furniture around the space, because modular architecture, using other things. So there's lots of other things that that you can cover with this. Okay, so moving to other questions. Okay, there's a question from Ms. Nadine Nanjawi. How does COVID-19 affect the way we teach architecture?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I think both of us as academic people have experienced this. We had been conducting studios online, teaching online, and I think this was really interesting in some ways and really challenging in others. So for example, when we were teaching architecture studio, you know, when you sit in a studio, you actually sit with the student, give her feedback, there's this interaction. However, actually, I was surprised that even with the online tool, you can still crit your design. And I noticed something very positive about actually being online, doing online lectures, is that maybe standing in the classroom, because people are usually cannot hear you. If you're in a big hall, for example, the other students cannot hear your crit to each and every single student, unless if they leave their work and they're actually sitting beside the person who's being crit. However, online gave a more idea for interaction between students, because she can still be working and can hear the comments. And I found people or students interacting more in this case, giving each other more feedback, because they can actually hear more, engage more. People even, some of the students even, you know, stopped coming late to class, and they were actually there again, touching upon the idea of no rush hour. So I think COVID-19, it won't change the way we teach architecture, but it becomes again, it highlights again that technology is there, smart systems are there, and it's really important overall to design things that are more resilient. And we are looking in resilience in architecture in different way now, and on different notes. Okay, do you take one of the other questions?
Can you open the question? Sorry. So my question is, you were talking about designing the future, but what about the present? I think present, what we're doing is subconsciously. A lot of people have designated areas in front of their house for sanitizing. So they get online packages a lot and they leave them outside. They leave their shoes outside. They go inside, they take off their abaya or whatever garment they have, and then they wash their hands and go to shower. But honestly, in terms of space, I can talk about my own experience. I started having an office in my my living room. I have a place for my kids, and what I do is I start designated areas to use in different times of days. I have a home gym that it's in my bedroom. So I think people are adapted their houses to this change, and they started to change the layout of their furniture just to be adaptable. Some of the people that actually answered the survey said that they are having a second floor in their villas for their grandchildren and for other functions. So people are now, and they're thinking of what to do in the next 3 months to, just in case another quarantine is happening.
I think it's not really discussing the future. It's more of the present. We're not talking about something that will happen in the future. It's not hard for us just to rearrange our houses or to consider, like people are considering moving from house to house, and this is not something that will happen in the future, but it's actually something we're actually, although it will impact the future and there's lots of impact on the future, but even presently there's lots of things that we can do that can accommodate these ideas of our houses. Okay, so another thing is that an interesting thing, question by Mishmish, how can we apply home smart system to lower mid and lower income house owners? Yeah, and again, because let me tell you, Mishmish, something. You know, the first time a mobile was, I remember getting a mobile when it was still a new mobile, it was not the technology used a lot, it was very expensive. Okay, when a technology is not well utilized, it's not really demanded by users, it's very expensive. But now everyone can own a mobile. It goes the same for the technology for lower income. When people now will be more aware of, you know, moving to the future, having okay, my first laptop, I think cost, when I was a student, cost something like 20,000 K. Now you can get a very decent laptop with 2,000 K and even 1,000. So again, when the technology is really well demanded, when lots of people demand it, it becomes more available, and then it will become cheaper, and hence it can apply for all levels and incomes. I think this leaves me to wonder, how's the future community? Okay, so Manal, Sami, I think this should be for our next talk.
How do you think will it live? Maybe next week?
Yeah, so okay, so we have another question from Manal Sami saying that, okay, so you discussed on a house level the COVID-19 situation, and this left me wondering about the future community. How do you think it will live? It most probably inevitable transformation. I think the community talk, you can wait, there's part 2 of our talk coming next week, inshallah. And we are talking specifically about the community and neighborhoods, and how this post-COVID-19 can help us, or this alert of COVID-19 can help us and alert us to making our neighborhood more resilient towards the future as well. Okay, do you think
the previous
as new movement in architecture, like?
Yes.
Okay, so let's okay, so
okay.
So do you think that previous year will histories or historians and this year really will consider as new movement in architecture and interior design? Yes, I do. I do believe that although a lot of people might think that there's no new normal and we're going to go back and everything's going to be as it was, I do think that the society is shocked enough that to reconsider that health and hygiene and privacy is an issue, and we should address it. And I think the future of architecture and interior design will change gradually throughout the years. and hopefully, of course, for a better future.
We covered most of the questions so far. Yes, I think we covered. Okay, we got some more questions coming. Okay, from Farah Akrabawi. To add another layer to the discussion, specifically exploring models to combat the problem of the pandemic, ensure a positive effect on community cohesion. How do you believe urban planners need to address the rising pandemic? What kind of roles can we play as designers in re-emerging urban life? Again, I don't want to say again next week because this is specifically what we'll be talking, but I'll give you a glimpse maybe just because it's a repetitive question now. Again, urban life comes with lots of dimension. And as I said earlier, when you mention things that has, like when we're talking on a dwelling level or a house level, it's completely different when you go on an urban level, because then the dimension, then the users are more, and then it becomes an integral part of lots of dimension coming together. And I think the most important thing is that I can say for now is that this change will allow people, it's a huge opportunity for developing our neighborhoods, for developing towards the future. Because with this, when you get a shock, you know, to your system, for example, when you fall ill, this is where we start, you know, taking care of our health more, what we eat, how we perceive our, for example, if we work out or not. So with any shock to our systems, and this goes on also on an urban level, for example, any shock facing a society, it alerts a society. It becomes a catalyst for change. It becomes an opportunity for the society that they have seen, they have experienced something. It's so much easier than telling them this will happen without them seeing it. So with this experience will come the idea where they will emerge. So lots of the authorities now have lots of opportunity of bringing lots of ideas, smart ideas, more resilient ideas, things that has been called for all over the world and different dimensions that have been implemented in different countries of the world. So I think for now, it's let's call it an opportunity for change, and it's a catalyst for change for later on. Would you like to? Okay, so that was the last question, I think.
Okay, that was the last question actually. Yes, Dr. Sherin and Sherin Razan, thank you for this first part. I hope we can find a solution for the Arabic part because we had plenty of people asking about it. I know you are conducting the research in English and maybe you are going to publish it or something in English, but we will try our best to find a solution for it from our part side. Thank you again. I think you had plenty of questions today.
Thank you very much.
We are done.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
Yeah, but let's have an advice for what do you think? How this will go on?
Would you like to start or something? Okay, so what do you, overall, like a conclusion? Okay, so if you want a conclusion for all of this, again, as we said, the research we're working on, we haven't, because it's it's actually a paper that we're going to publish, so we didn't want to include lots of our results, of course, because it's still under publication. But as a conclusion, how we will move around is that we have to be more aware. And I think our slides where we have to become more thoughtful in design, there's lots of aspects that we took for granted. And I think if this situation highlights anything, it highlights that there was lots of things we take for granted in life. And this goes even under lots of sectors, even design itself. We took for granted a home design. People rented a house just to sleep in at home at night, because most of the day they will spend outside of their house. But now they realize, no, there's more to their homes than just sleeping or just hosting people. There's lots of things and activities that can be conducted from home. So there is a moment where we have to look at our homes now with a different eye. There is a moment where we have to look at our designs with a different eye. And perhaps actually now we're more aware that when we rent a house, when we renovate our houses, when we even stay in our houses, lots of people started remodeling even during the lockdown. ordering things from Sako, from IKEA, just, you know, to rearrange their houses in a way that's more pleasing. So now we as designers have to understand that this should not be taken for granted. If you're going to be stuck in home all day, we might as well be comfortable. We might as well look at something that's pleasant and that can accommodate all our needs.
Just to add one thing, me and Dr. Sherin are both sustainable oriented, with a background in sustainability, and we've been talking about sustainability now for 6 years together, 7 years, and now people are actually demanding. We want more sunlight. We want to go out. We want greenery. We want we want our houses oriented in a certain way. We want more trees and water bodies outside, and this is a basic need. And we kept saying to people that sustainability is a basic need. It's something that comes in naturally, and now it's like a wake-up call, and subconsciously everyone is actually demanding that. And I think we should go back a step and see the bigger picture. There are changes that we can do today and tomorrow and after tomorrow, but I think that if we're gonna make a better future, these small steps that we're gonna take today and tomorrow are actually gonna lead to that bigger picture. And thank you very much.
Thank you
I
again.
think it's all, yeah.
Done.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you, ArchiNet, for hosting us, and thank you for all the questions that was received today. I hope I answered most of them. And if you need to communicate with us at any point, we also have our emails, I think, on the last slide, and our LinkedIn, so that.
Can you write it down in the chat? Yeah.
Yes, sure. Okay. I'll do that, just in case anyone wants to. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So.
Okay. 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 Is it?
Yes.
Okay, and Razan. Yes. Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you for your time. See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.